As of Tuesday, 38 members of Congress, including 7 members of the Senate and 31 members of the House, have announced they will not seek re-election in 2024. 13 of those announcements came in November alone. That's the highest monthly total in more than a decade. Divisions over various policy initiatives, denial over the 2020 election, and the multi-week Speaker of the House drama are among the top issues cited by these lawmakers for wanting to get out of Dodge. The planned exodus from Congress comes during a pivotal election year in which the balance of power in both chambers will likely be closely contested. For more on this latest trend in Congress, we turn to David Wasserman, senior editor and elections analyst for the Cook Political Report. That is an independent political newsletter that analyzes and rates congressional and presidential elections. David, welcome to Morning Rush. Good to see you. Early departures from Congress are always kind of telling of the political mood and political landscape. What is your read on this latest wave heading into perhaps an election year like none other we've ever seen?
Yes, I think this could be just the beginning of what we're likely to see of an exodus from Congress. Republicans are frustrated that it took not only 15 votes to elect a speaker, but they were mired in a month of drama after Kevin McCarthy was ousted. You're seeing a number of institutionalist Republicans, committee leaders who have served their time and are wondering why very little is getting done. And the only solace for Republicans is that they predominantly come from safe Republican seats, so they're not jeopardizing their party's chances of holding the districts next November. On the Democratic side, you also have a number of Democrats who are frustrated serving in the minority, frustrated with the dysfunction in the House and on the other side. And there are 5 Democratic open seats that Republicans have a chance of taking. And keep in mind the narrow margin in both the House and Senate means that every one of these retirements and open seats counts.
I'm reminded of that very telling moment years ago with the late Senator John McCain when he stood there in the Senate and said, "We're getting nothing done, my friends. We're getting nothing done." And as someone who enjoyed his independent maverick reputation, it was quite a moment because it was him kind of lecturing his colleagues saying, what are we doing here? And I was reading another report recently that said this Congress in particular may get the least done of any Congress since the Great Depression. Has it really been that lackluster Congress that they are competing for a dubious distinction from a Congress back in the 20s and 30s?
Well, part of the reason we saw an overthrow of the Speaker was that the Speaker did bring key legislation to keep the government open and to prevent us from hitting the debt ceiling or falling off a debt ceiling cliff to the floor for Democrats to support. And these pieces of legislation actually got more support from Democrats than from Republicans, which is what riled the Freedom Caucus and the right flank of the party. So there is still some appetite for bipartisan collaboration on these basic measures. And I think we are likely to see collaboration, for example, on the Farm Bill and in some committees that still function on a bipartisan basis. Keep in mind, there are 18 Republicans in the House from districts that Joe Biden carried in 2020 who have some incentive to reach across the aisle. There are also 5 Democrats from districts that Donald Trump carried. But most of this is happening out of view and kind of below the radar of cable news. And yet there are these long stall periods, for example, the Speaker lockout, that cause many members to reevaluate.
And certainly there's a difference between proactive legislation that moves the ball down the field versus the basic functioning and staving off a calamity like hitting the debt ceiling or having another government shutdown. So there's a difference between those items that they kind of have to get done to avoid a calamity and getting something proactively done. I'm just wondering, though, when you have a Congress kind of mired in all of this, who catches the blame? Does everything kind of go back to the White House and President Biden? Does Trump catch some of the blame because the people that caused the Speaker drama were essentially the MAGA folks and the Trump loyalists in the House who toppled McCarthy and others? Who kind of catches the heat when voters get their say?
I think the verdict has not yet been rendered, and a lot will depend on the next few months. Congress has to tackle a variety of issues that both parties care a lot about: immigration, Israel, Ukraine, certainly the future of these government funding bills, which new Speaker Johnson wants to split up into a laddered continuing resolution. Although we're probably not in any better position to avoid a government shutdown in January than we would have been had this been settled by Speaker McCarthy. So, depending on what we see in January, if we do see Republicans refuse to pass funding that keeps the government open, they could catch blame for it. But keep in mind, by that point, we're in a presidential election year where the shadow of a likely rematch between Trump and Biden could obscure what's happening in Congress.
Last question here. This was kind of the big political story yesterday, is that a big money conservative group backed by the billionaire Koch brothers announced that it would be throwing a lot of its juice and money behind Nikki Haley, which gives her campaign a critical boost. And we're certainly not far from the Iowa caucuses, and the real story of that is going to be who comes in second behind Trump, unless there's a major surprise. Talk about what you think that story means, and is this worse news for Trump or worse news for Ron DeSantis, who has been on a collision course with Governor Haley?
This is a highly unusual race in that it's a bitter race for a distant second place finish in these primaries. And one of the reasons why neither Governor DeSantis nor Governor Haley have been training their focus on Trump is that they could be in the running for a spot on the ticket, depending on how they resonate with voters in the primaries in the months to come. Haley probably has her best chance at a strong showing in New Hampshire, where there are a lot of independent voters who participate in the Republican primary. And depending on whether she edges out Ron DeSantis in Iowa or in New Hampshire, she could prove her strength. And keep in mind, having a strong showing in the primaries is valuable when you have a lot of time left before the Republican convention and a nominee who is facing 91 counts and is 77 years old.
And again, people say, oh, the election's a year away. It's a year away, but Iowa is critical. That helps shape the narrative in January, and then Super Tuesday in March, that if things go normally, whatever normal means these days, we will have our presumptive nominees perhaps after that big day in March, if history is any guide. But again, it's an unconventional year. David Wasserman, senior editor and elections analyst for the Cook Political Report. Thank you for your time and insight. Please come back. We appreciate it.